Hi there, it's Polly here. Yay! With Mr. Snoots, Far Travel Snoots. Yay! And a couple of friends. Yay! So, anyway, a very good game, an older game, one that is still going, a robust game. Full Thrust. Kind of the tabletop game of Starship Miniatures combat. Okay, so a very slight caveat on this one. The designer, John Tuffley, is an old friend of mine. I love him to bits. Little side story on that one. So I went over to the UK because I was working on the Discworld games with Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett was an old friend of mine. I was over there to do the thing for him. But I knew John from correspondence, so his games group kind of looked after me. They took me in. So that was the games group I was playing with over in the UK while I was there. So we did role-playing games and we did tabletop games, and they took me to conventions, and that was fantastic. We went to see old Roman sites together, Colchester. What was quite funny is part of that group was the author Mary Gentle. If you've ever read the book Orcs and so on, that's one of hers. And I turned up and everyone's staring at me. You're behind this. Turns out that I'd had a comic book out called Tank Vixens, which had a female punk character in it. Mary Gentle, who had been very long hair there, and she was kind of the fairy goddess of the group, and they were all crushing on her so hard. It was pretty funny. But she's read this comic, fell in love with that punk character, decided this is for her, so she's gone punk. So now she's got kind of shorn off hair. She's got a mohawk. She's wearing the plaid mini skirt, the fishnets with holes torn in them, giant bother boots. The tied plaid belly shirt and all this sort of stuff. And they're all blaming me for it because their fairy princess has gone punk. It's like, I didn't do it. Oh, she was hilarious, and she also had a range of X-rated naughty novels that were sold at service stations all over England under an assumed name. Shh. Those are pretty damn funny. Anyway, I digress. So, John's stuff, he sat down, big science fiction fan, and he sat down to do pretty much the definitive miniatures games for Starship Combat. He's got a ground combat game that we'll go into at another time. John's also got full miniatures ranges for this, but they can work with any miniatures you like. I've got dozens of fleets for this. I've got the Stardate 3000 ones, which are like some of the original model ships sold in the 70s, and they're beautiful. I love them. The alien destroyers and so on are fantastic. Look them up sometime. But the rules themselves are pretty damn simple. What you've got is a system where you're running everything off D6. It plays on a straight tabletop. No marks, no hexes. Now, you've got a set amount of thrust for your ships. We'll get into ship design and everything in a bit. When it's time to move, your ship will move at whatever rate you put into forward movement from its overall thrust available. If you are going to move the vessel, pivoting its facing costs you movement points to do it for every sort of 60 degrees that you're going to turn it. And that kind of is supposed to represent essentially vector movement blasting in the opposite direction you need to kind of slow and move it around. You can slow down, but basically you're going to coast. You have to use thrust to slow down, so it can't just come to a halt. And you can use the thrust to accelerate. So it does have a bit of a kind of a vector movement cruise to it, which most games do not. So thank you. You can put terrain on the table, which I love. Just buy some old plastic balls from down at the local supermarket or Kmart, cut them in half, paint them to look up like planets. You put them in the middle of the table. That's a planet that you're flying around. There are little rules. You can put gravity around that'll influence you, so it'll pull you towards it when you get within a set number of inches. So you're going to have to use some thrust to basically correct your course a bit. You can get bits of old broken polystyrene and so on, paint them up as asteroids, and you can have your asteroid fields to fly through. Fantastic. Weapons, so they've got essentially beam weapons of different sort of categories, A, B, and C. They do different damage and have different ranges. Essentially, the ranges are 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet. And the top level one will do 3 points of damage if it's within 1 foot, 2 points of damage if it's within 2 feet, and 1 point of damage if it's within 3 feet. You've got shields. Damage will chew off shields on the various flanks of your ships, and then it gets into doing internal damage. You have a ship page for your ship, which has all the internal systems marked as boxes. There's random charts. When you get hit, the damage will randomly allocate into internal systems. Cross those off because you can't use them anymore. Somebody blew them up. You can have missiles that launch, and they travel on the board and try and collide with the enemy ship, in which case they do warhead damage. You can use little lasers to try and point defense and fire at missiles. There are some energy torpedoes and so on. Now, these rules also tried to take into effect games that people might want to play with stuff that came from cool anime. Remember, these rules have been around for a long time. So if you happen to like Star Blazers, Battleship Yamato, and like the idea of spinal weapons, they put in spinal weapon rules. Maybe you don't want that in your game. You'll have to decide before you play whether you want that in your game. What does that do? Well, it makes a very destructive weapon, but it has to be fired straight down the line of the ship, so it is something you can try and majorly maneuver out of the way of, and it takes a couple of rounds to build up the charge to fire it. Oh, okay, fair enough. Maybe you don't want that. Maybe you do. Fighters. There's very good fighter and carrier rules in this, so if you are inspired by Battlestar Galactica or some of the Japanese anime shows, or Star Wars for that matter, you could move away from having a fleet that concentrates on big gunships and decide, I'm going to have carriers that launch swarms of fighters. There's very simple basic rules for fighters. There's also slightly more advanced ones if you want to have different sorts of fighter. All right, I'm going to split these into attack ships, which are designed to, wahoo, launch torpedoes at the enemy ships, and interceptors, which are designed to intercept fighters that the other guy is going to be sending up to stop my fighters. So, that complexity builds. But at its basic core, the basic game has a series of basic ships in it that you can choose from, and a few basic options that if you want to vary those a bit, and you can just play. Boom! And the system is simple enough that you'll be playing, reading enough to play the games, probably only take you about 15 minutes. And they're good fun. They work really well. Added to all this is a ship design system that lets you create your own ships from scratch. John's quite good at doing these design systems. You can build pretty much any damn full thing you want. So you want to build a specific carrier, or you've got an idea for, I want ships that just fire on the broadsides. I'm going to pack tons of, instead of spending money on big turrets, I'm going to have cheaper ones that just fire on the broadsides. You can do all those kind of wacky, crazy things. I want something that's amazingly fast that zooms around. I want slow-moving giant battle wagons. Design what you will, my friends. It's in there. Love you, John. One thing that John never quite worked out on some of his things is that he'll have systems that are obviously better than others, and so people just choose those rather than the less good systems. And the only thing is they might cost you more in money if there's a budget, but from a design point of view, people often, they just want the best. And they're looking at the spaces. How much bounce for the ounce can I pack into this bigger hull? And the fact that if they choose like a crappy gun, it'll choose up the same space as a good gun, but the good gun will do more damage, but the good gun is going to cost like 20% more than the crappy gun. It's like, I'll pay the 20% any day. So you may want to tinker with the system, and that again is the strength of the whole thing. You can tinker it any way you want and make any way you want. There are many optional rules. If you wanted to try, cloaking devices, they're in there. If you wanted to try all kinds of other little, bits and pieces taken from different shows and whatever, he has put those in there if you want to try them. They're all optional rules. So before a game, just sort of discuss what you're doing. Let's just play straight. Let's not bother with, cloaking devices and all that sort of crap. You don't need them. That's actually a really good choice right there. That's a great choice. we've played these in many variations for many, many, many years, and they're great. It is truly a good game, truly a robust and simple game. There is a set of extra rules for it called More Thrust, which gives you a lot of other options for building ships and extra rules and, mines and more missiles and more weapons and things. And, that's great. It builds on it beautifully. All of these rules are free. They are free to download from the Ground Zero Games site in the UK, GZG. You can just download the PDFs for nothing. Who can say better than free? And because they're quite well spread, you'll find opponents. So these are a great set of rules. Okay, so some comments. So I have lots and lots and lots of fleets for this. It is actually it's fun and addictive because it's a cheap game to play. A fleet for this, at max, you're only going to have like a dozen ships on the table. So you can buy a dozen cool starship, models and kind of sort of whatever scale you want. But, we're not talking 3 feet long, you're going to have them out this big or whatever. And as long as you can kind of look at them and say, oh, this is obviously a big one, this is a little one, so this is my battleship versus my frigate. Great. So, I have a ton. They're great fun, and there are tons and tons of different sites and print sites and so on that make really cool ships. John's ships are rather cool because he's got his own setting, and there are some special rules for some of the races from the setting. So there's one that basically doesn't use energy weapons, it uses mass drivers, but therefore it doesn't have shields, so it has physical armor on its ships because, as he says, races and technologies tend to be developed to fight their own technologies. So yeah, it's sort of interesting. You get a thing where two sides turn up with defenses that don't really work against the other side's weapons, which I quite like. But I check out the Failons on his site. So there was an anime called Outlanders, which had organic ships, and I loved it. Manga system by Joji Manabe, and John liked this and designed this. These are organic ships, but the Failon vessels, we just called them dick ships because that's what they look like. It tends to be like a long kind of veiny looking shaft. It's got some kind of end and it's got some kind of engines here. And face it, John's British. He knows exactly what he was doing. And so I have made, just literally as a gag for a convention, I made a fleet of Failon ships, and they look appalling. They're wonderful. It's just literally, it's horrible. These veiny things, and it's like engage Throbaton drive and stop that. We mean it. What? It's just my Failons. What are you worried about? A friend has done some good mini campaign rules for it. It's very easy to do campaigns for because they've got like rules in there for repairs and battle repairs. So yeah, he's anticipated doing little mini campaigns and things. It's so easy to do. I did have some great ones where you could have we were playing a battle and okay, I've got a nice array of ships. So I had some big battleships and so on, and I put them on a shelf to the side of the table, and then I started putting ships on there. And of course, my opponent, he keeps looking at these ships I've got on the shelf, and he's really holding back because he's certain that I've got these plotted to come on later on during the game. And then when he was holding out and holding back, and he was actually getting the living daylights beaten out of him because he wasn't engaging with everything. He was keeping too much back. And then finally, oh God, I'm just wondering when these things are coming on. So, what? What coming on? What? No, look up the points. Well, we've each got 2,000 points worth of ships on the table. What are they doing there? So, well, they were just the ones in the box that I wasn't going to use. You bastard, I thought that was the second wave going to come on. So, yeah, I figured you might think that. Evil gamesmanship 101. But yeah, so if you have similarly armed ships, like if you've taken gunships, for instance, one thing I have noticed, drinks, hey, let's use funny animals. One thing I have noticed is that you'll tend to head towards each other because your energy weapons do more damage as they get close. You'll start kind of turning into each other. There'll be a brief kind of flurry of shots. And then you'll kind of figure, I'm getting a bit damaged here, plus I'm going too fast to slow down. So you'll pass by each other, and then you'll sort of and then you'll come back at each other again. So you tend to get these kind of little corkscrews happening. That's just really a quirk of the game. If you've got, however, if one of you has based his stuff more on missiles, for instance, for that, if the other guy's largely gun-based, you don't want him close, and you're going to maneuver to try and keep your distance because you're trying to fling things at him that can damage him from a distance. So yeah, you get a game then when someone's actually keeping their distance and maneuvering. Same goes with the fighters and so on. You're going to have carriers moving in and kind of making attack runs, where they'll move in, start shedding fighters, and then they're going to move out to keep themselves way out of danger, and then they're probably going to circle back to try and intercept the fighters that are coming back for a refit and rearm. So you've got these kind of circulating things, and so you're going to want a little curtain of combat vessels to shield them and so on. So actual fleet tactics come in. I love it. So anyway, these game rules are excellent. You really, if you like Starship combat, give these a try. Like I said, you can't say cheaper than free, and they work with any miniatures that you feel like playing. If you want to trot out your old Star Trek fleet, by all means do. If you've got your cool little Star Blazers plastic things, or you've got your Crusher Joe ships, or you've got your Mighty Failon deck ships, or the Stardate 3000, whatever, you can bring them out. The designing, I always find ship design rules are kind of like hypnotic, because you sit there and make your superb, unbeatable vessels. Full in the knowledge that the other guy has done the same, and they're not unbeatable. They're going to, clash together under the ordinary function of the rules and do their ordinary things, but you'll still have the glory of your mighty design showing its worth. So they're fun, they're engaging, and they're well served with miniatures, and I think this is one of the great classic science fiction games. John, I salute you. Your game has lasted for decades. It's got a following on Facebook. It's got a following at conventions. God, he brought this out in the 80s. Still being played, after 30, 40 years is a really, really good sign that a game had great bones and can continue to be played for many decades to come. Check it out. Full Thrust and its supplement More Thrust on the Ground Zero Games website. Anyway, cheers everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the reviews. Yay, Mr. Snoots and I will keep on doing them. Yeah. And hopefully get some more crazy places in which to do reviews. If you like the reviews, find me on Patreon. Hit like, hit subscribe, and hopefully I get to see you around the gaming table someday. Cheers, everyone.